I know, another video on 2000s nostalgia. But look, it was a bizarre time. We were all too young for smartphones and iPads, but just old enough where the internet and game consoles were beyond their infancy and sort of resemble what we have now. Sort of, if being the keyword here. Gaming around this time was something special. Video game consoles, for example, were pretty unique specimens, each having their own distinct libraries, and the aims to sell you the product instead of just selling you a gaming PC with a logo on them. While I can sit here and tell you how good the GameCube and PS2 were for the 1000th time, one aspect of gaming culture that I feel people don't talk about anymore is what we were playing on our parents' laptops when we weren't on our consoles. I don't know what to call this genre of game exactly. These were basically online MMOs tailored for a younger audience. I'm thinking ClubPenguin, Pop Tropica, Webkinz, and I could go on. Often these revolved around a personalized avatar of some form or taking care of a pet, making you an omniscient character in the world. They had the aim and goal to not be something you sit down and beat, but were more or less day-to-day experiences, ideally with an active community where you would always be hooked and logging on to see what's new. In a sense, these weren't really video games as much as they were virtual worlds. For one, they were basically free or, at a very minimum, very cheap to play. Parents loved them as a result. They could set their kids on the computer while they went to do chores or work or things of that nature. Today, we're going to take a look at the rise and fall of early 2000s online community MMOs, whatever you want to call them, and talk about them and my experiences with them as well. The first one I played was Webkinz. Now this concept was ahead of its time in my opinion, being kind of similar to Amiibo or Skylanders where you go out, buy a toy, and then be able to play with it later. Here's how it worked. There were many animals, whatever this is, that were sold in stores as plushies. They often came in two sizes, with the littlekins being obviously cheaper. I think the weirdest thing for me about Webkinz as a kid was these were never in Walmarts or Targets or any stores like that, but instead, and I kid you not, I remember seeing them at post offices, coffee shops, and card greeting Hallmark stores. I don't know why. So you get home, you eat your goddamn Happy Meal that you also strong-armed your mom into buying, and enter the code that came with your plushie. Upon entering this code, your Webkinz is transported to your computer, living in a room that you can further customize, and from there, they truly are your virtual pet you can check in on. For instance, sometimes your Webkinz will be sick, so you'd have to take them to Dr. Quack. Yes, that's actually his name, and it's hilarious. Apparently this guy retired in March 2015. It can't be. Here's the catch though. You can only play for 1 year past the registration of your pet. Apparently nowadays you're able to play Webkinz without buying a new plush, but back when I was a kid and actively played this, you were basically just screwed. So that means yet again bothering the fuck out of your parents and getting yet another toy that sat around the house and did nothing else. Parents loved this game. My brother and I combined had about 30 Webkinz by the end of our retirement from the site. Unfortunately, after you buy 10 Webkinz pets, Gans, the company behind this, tells you to go frick yourself and doesn't give you any more rooms for your new pets. So I remember a lot of my Webkinz just ended up having to share rooms, making everything feel more like a hospital or prison than a home. What's neat is that there are multiple types of room designs too. You have indoors, outdoors, underwater, and even treetops, and to be fair, you can always buy rooms, so it's not limited to purchasing the toys. After you and your pet got settled, you can go to the W shop, and buy food and furniture. Setting up the rooms was always so fun and addicting. I remember as a kid just spending hours on it. There was so much you could do with them. You could either make the rooms as chaotic as possible, you could put one chair in a room and laugh, or actually collect the entire furniture sets to make something like a classroom or a kitchen. It was very novel. Now you'd think with a purchase system and structure like this would be entirely microtransaction based, and it eventually kind of became that in 2011, which is sad. But thankfully many of us didn't have our childhoods butchered, as in the old days you could earn money by just playing arcade games or doing whatever events that Gans came up with that month. Speaking of the arcade, I love this place. Mini games of some form are very much a consistent focus in basically every community game we're going to be talking about today, and it makes sense. These aren't so in-depth that you'll spend your whole life playing it, but it's a nice break from the otherwise sort of sim-like experience. As it pertains to Webkinz, there are so many games that I can't possibly go over them all, but there were some genuinely addicting and clever little romps here. Nothing mind-blowing, as some of them were just variations of already made games. I remember Ant-Mania 2, for instance, was a direct Snake ripoff. I mean, do you really think kids are gonna be there and like, oh gross, a Snake ripoff? They don't even know what Snake is. And that's only scratching the surface of what this online space entailed. Webkinz was seriously a living and breathing virtual world. There were newspapers and a clubhouse where you can hang out with other people. By just sitting there and, talking in pre-made sentences. It's fun when you're 6, okay? There were many different shops. There was a post office, and as said earlier, so many different events like the Pet of the Month and Webkinz Day. So Webkinz still exists, but it's been commercialized to hell and is very much not relevant anymore. A lot of the website is still intact, but they stopped making new plushies and there's blatant corporate greed. I consider it sort of a graveyard now. Aiding in this fact, a lot of the free features were taken away in 2014 with the introduction of the Webkinz Deluxe membership. Now I can understand something like this in other games, but it's kind of cringe-inducing when you consider that you're already spending money on the plushies. Like if I was a kid in this era, there'd be no way in hell my parents would spend $20 on a toy and then pay $6 monthly after that. Kind of feels scummy to me that a game made for children that was supposed to be wholesome and fun just sort of turned into a cash grab. To make matters worse, Gans Incorporated revealed Webkinz Next in 2020. And I'm sorry, but what the actual hell is this? I don't even know how to respond to this. This is downright embarrassing. It doesn't even look like the same franchise anymore. Connectimals looked better than this.
Next, we're going to take a look at Club Penguin, which did not end as tragically as Webkinz did, because it ended more tragically.
Club Penguin went live nearly around the same time as Webkinz, and was a smash success. You could tell because Disney bought it, and yep, the good old Disney purchase. Take something good and kill it. Club Penguin was kind of free, but they did put a ton of features behind a paid membership. And as a kid who played with a free membership for hours and hours, it kind of felt like complete crap. You couldn't even dress up your penguin if you were a free player. So you'd often just walk into an igloo, and everyone automatically knew you were f***ing poor. You also weren't able to decorate your igloo as a free player, and you could only adopt a red or blue puffle, the pets of the world, and you'd be locked out of the occasional VIP events. Like, why even let people walk for free?
Now look, I'm not saying Disney would orchestrate an environment for kids that would encourage them to spend more money or anything like that, but
Now look, you could still experience the general gist of Club Penguin, walking around, talking to people, and playing the mini-games, but it just always felt kinda crappy. Considering this game is, well, a club with many people talking, inherent social statuses would develop, and I remember seeing free players get bullied quite often. I think the thing that was most strange about this game is the fact that you could really talk to whoever and honestly just say basically whatever you want. Club Penguin claims it had moderation, and it does have some filters, but as a kid who grew up playing this every day, I call it hearsay to say this game was completely safe. Obviously, you couldn't just join a lobby and go all angry video game nerd on people. They did have some restrictions. If you typed in a swear, it just wouldn't send, and you weren't able to enter numbers, a protection for people who would ask for your age. The problem is, it was super easy to get through the censors. I remember seeing swears all the time, just spelled out in many different ways, and I remember penguins would get around the numbers rule by throwing a certain amount of snowballs when asked an age. Like, I'll be honest, I wouldn't have let my kid play this game. Go back to Webkinz. There was a specific niche culture on Club Penguin in this era, though, that I don't think will ever be replicated again. I remember so much about the experience. People used to host parties and go to the main lobbies and advertise the hell out of them. Then you would go and you'd see the hard work they put into decorating, and it would just genuinely be fun to hang out and talk to people. There were so many rumors about this game too, like tipping the iceberg. People, myself included, would go to it all the time, take out the jackhammer, and swear that it was gonna tip over the more we worked on it.
so basically we just wasted our time.
Now eventually the iceberg did tip, which is pretty funny that the developers noticed that this was a recurring trend. Some stuff on Club Penguin was just weird though. I remember people used to hang out at the pet shop and pretend they were waiting to be adopted. Now as a kid, I didn't think anything of it, but looking back, yeah. And another problem is people used to online date and, roleplay. Yeah, roleplay, let's just say that. In the public places. Again, I really don't think kids should have been exposed to this sort of thing. Now look, I grew up with Club Penguin and I came out just fine.
You're the kid they laughed at because Bakugan sucks!
So it's not like this was genuinely traumatizing for everyone, and it's unlikely you'd explicitly see something offensive on your day-to-day playthrough. But looking back on it as an adult, just the idea of how this site worked kinda makes me uncomfortable. But hey, there's plenty from Club Penguin that had nothing to do with this aspect. For one, there were servers that had basically no chat period, which is a ton safer. But on top of that, there was still a decent amount of things to do without other penguins, like the aforementioned minigames. Like with Webkinz, they were a bit derivative, but still incredibly charming, and the animations of the penguins in them really added to this universe. Despite there being better Flash games on sites like CoolMathGames.com and Newgrounds, those sites were always a wild west full of crap. Oh my god. My parents and schools never really liked me on those sites, so at least with Club Penguin, it was a place for minigames that you could sort of trust, and I think that was sort of the biggest appeal of it. And of course, there were many events and new additions. I distinctly remember when they added a dojo where you had to take a whole test to become a ninja. There were holidays, decorations, and even immersive world-building events like anniversary parties. And when the game was feeling really daring, they'd even throw in some good old natural events. Yeah, I don't know why they did that. Club Penguin became a smash hit, and its popularity meant that it would evolve into not just a game, but a franchise. Toys were released, some of which I even owned, and even video games on the Nintendo DS and Wii. Now these games were sort of trash, but we'll save that for another day. I just wanted to give you an idea of how big this franchise was. This is one of the only games of this nature that I distinctly remember blatant ripoffs releasing too, including a panda-oriented game called Pan-Fu, which we all played as kids in my classes because it was not blocked by our network, but Club Penguin probably rightfully was. was. It's really funny even thinking about that, but we genuinely all made accounts to play it. There was even a Build-A-Bear ClubPenguin thing, and I remember playing it, but honest to God, I don't know why. I'm getting off topic though, but my point is that ClubPenguin was an extremely popular franchise that would be a defining aspect of millions of childhoods.
So Disney decided, let's kill it in cold blood.
The day was January 30th, 2017. Disney announced in a newsletter that ClubPenguin would be discontinued in approximately 2 months. This was so everyone would go over to their amazing, in their words, new product, ClubPenguin Island, which was so amazing that it ended after a measly 2 years. I was 17 at the time this released, and I felt way too old to even consider playing something like it. But looking at the footage online, it looks abysmal, okay? It looks absolutely abysmal. Let me remind you that this was released in 2016, and honest to God, looks like something that would be on the PlayStation 2. ClubPenguin Island mainly started as a phone game. It would eventually come to PCs, but that's pretty much a good reason for why it looks this bad. But in my opinion, at that point, you really should just do a cartoony style and save some face. We learned nothing from Pac-Man Kart Rally, okay? But the better question, in my opinion, is who the hell is this supposed to appeal to? Are you trying to appeal to dedicated, hardcore ClubPenguin players? Well, that's out the window, because people who played it on the PC probably aren't going to want to just switch over to a phone game. It eventually did come to PC, like I said, in 2018 when basically no one cared. So are you marketing this towards kids? Great idea, because kids in 2016 know just what ClubPenguin is, right? Why not just bring back Neopets while we're at it?
Oh yeah. We're talking about Neopets.
I can't make a video like this without talking about Neopets. This was the grandfather of this sort of genre, and was incredibly novel at the time of release. I did play this one as a kid as well, but I'll just say up front that I didn't really have a good time with it, so bear with me if I'm not oozing with passion and good memories here. It's not personal, I promise. Now you could probably get a gist for what Neopets is looking at the title. Virtual pets. Now I know what you're thinking right off the bat. Oh, creepy creatures, what a shameless Pokemon ripoff. Well, funnily enough, Neopets, despite releasing in 1999, was in development since 1997. So while Gen 1 of Pokemon was out by then, I think it would be kind of a stretch to say it was a ripoff. Plus, these games have nothing in common besides weird, wacky creatures. I replayed Neopets for this video to get a reminder of what it was, and funnily enough, I have the same problems with it now that I had in like 2005. I don't know what kind of Elmer glue and sticks this website runs off of, but things are just always down, or the website loads slowly for no explainable reason. I also think the menus are just kind of awkward to navigate. And when everything is just a website and no animations or things like that, I think it was harder for me to really feel immersed in the world. In the game, there are really only a few things you can even do, which in my experience usually just boils down to clicking on a store, and this game has inflation? Neopets inflation? Give me a break. Are there Neopets recessions? Is there a Neopets stock market? If inflation's on the table, so is anything. Neopets true crime. Neopets Big Bang Theory. Neopets space-time distortion rips into goddamn... You can also haggle prices with the storekeeper, which is kind of cute, and I guess it kind of taught kids a valuable skill. Like, listen, Neopets has its charm, and it has its moment in internet history, but it's really not that fun in 2023.
I'm also not a kid anymore, so I'm not the key demographic. I talk about Nintendo games instead, which is for much more serious gamers.
Although my general lack of fun is not just because I'm older now, because as said, I remember having these problems as a kid as well. I remember just distinctly me and my parents sitting around the computer and just not being able to figure out this site. There are mini games at least throughout the various towns, but they aren't very good. Like this arrow mini game where I can't get a single arrow to make a dent in the bullseye. The only indicator of when to fire is the highlighted bullseye in the corner, but it really doesn't make any sense. The others aren't anything to write home about either.
Dear Mom, today I played a Flash game that was coded on a toaster.
I feel like I'm gonna piss people off with this opinion, but I just really don't feel like Neopets aged well. It's a relic of its time and just felt like it was begging for a facelift.
Not what I meant.
In general, as much as I think Neopets is antiquated, I also think it's sort of nice that it hasn't evolved. It's a fascinating thing to look back at. You could probably show it to your kids and be like, well, this is how we used to play back in my day, and it's a genuine experience. There's refusing to adapt to the times, and then there's Roblox. Oh my god, what the hell happened here? Roblox is an online game oriented around building things that's still going to this very day, with companies like Sega and Cartoon Network even releasing games on the platform, and even musicians who do virtual concerts. But what is Roblox exactly? Well, it's by far the most ambitious community game I've ever seen, and as someone who played this game religiously in the late 2000s and early 2010s, it was mind-blowing. I mean, there was nothing like it. It's debatable whether or not this even counts as one of those games, but I personally remember this being extremely prominent in internet culture back then, so in my mind, I do consider it one of the lads, you know? The hook of Roblox, as said, is making your own games that other people can come and play. The game development software was amazing. It struck a very fine balance between being simple for kids to understand and complex for true game designers to really get a feel for. Now, of course, the elephant in the room is the fact that Roblox is very clearly Lego inspired, which is true, but I think only focusing on that is just sort of a disservice, because it's really only an aesthetic for an otherwise expansive world. Over time, that style kind of fizzled out, and looking at it today, people have made some very impressive games on Roblox, some of which almost resemble actual video games. At least when I was active on it, there were so many genres of games represented here. The most famous one of these was the obstacle courses, or obbies as people would call them, which would test your platforming skills. And as someone who used to make these, it sort of felt like Super Mario Maker, but 3D and 10 years before it. You also had to kind of test your own product before you release it, you know, or not, but you're just kind of a bad cookie at that point. There were tycoons, there were big rig sort of experiences that tested your patience to get to a VIP room, there were Pokemon clones, quizzes for your favorite video game characters, hangout spots, RPGs. Roblox is insane. It had everything, and it's no question as to why it was popular then and is still popular now. On top of building, you could even design and sell your own clothing. That can't go horribly wrong or anything. You could pay for these clothes with two currencies: tickets, the basic collectible, and Robux, the higher end one. But to get a daily allowance of Robux, along with the ability to build on more than one map and sell things, you had to go bother your parents and steal someone's credit card for legal purposes. That's a joke. Now, back in my day, this was called the Builders Club. I think they went a bit too far with this. There were 3 separate tiers to subscribe to, with the highest one being $20 a month. Now, I'm not gonna say technically it wasn't fair. Each membership gave you more maps to work with and plenty of other benefits, and the highest tier, being called the outrageous Builders Club, got 100. That being said, I do feel like 4 separate tiers, if you include the free one, it's just kind of a bit much for something like this. These were all replaced with the Roblox Premium service in 2019, which still has 3 tiers, it just has a worse name. It's really not that different. They just kind of pay you once a month like an allowance instead of daily, and a few other benefits. Eventually, tickets were removed, period, to raise the value of the membership too, because go screw yourself. So that's all fun and good, right? Build whatever you want, sell whatever you want, and talk to whoever you want. That can't possibly go wrong.
It was a literal disaster.
Okay, look, I know on this show we usually don't go into the dark topics, but I think the biggest problem with Roblox is how unmoderated and chaotic it was. Like, I played this game as a kid, and I don't think I can actually say some of the stuff I saw and heard and had explained to me even without this video being demonetized. It was bad, though. Whoever's job it was to moderate should probably be fired and maybe sued. Like, whatever concerns I had with ClubPenguin were so small compared to Roblox, and that's on top of recent accusations, like having a dangerous microtransaction program and even exploiting children game developers. Like, what the heck, dude? You can't have something like this on the internet without some sort of problem. When your primary audience are children, it's just not a good idea to have a game that's basically the Wild West of the entire internet, but despite that, it's 2023 and people are still playing it. If it's up when I'm a dad one day, if I catch my kids on it, someone's getting grounded for a long time. That's all I'm saying. But that being said, Roblox is a weird outlier in these sorts of community games. Most of them either died or turned into a watered down version of themselves, or both. So the fact that it's still relevant to this day is considerably impressive and is the exception to the topic, but not the rule. I could sit here for hours and probably tell you more of them. Like, there was Toontown, ran by Disney and well before ClubPenguin at that, which for the time honestly didn't look too bad, and is a cult classic to this day.
They also shut this one down.
You had Pop Tropica, a game just bleeding out personality and love put into it. All cartoony, with events like the Diary of a Wimpy Kid one, because Greg Kinney worked on both. And of course, the unique aspect of it being of side-scroller. There were games on the fence of this genre, like RuneScape, which arguably is one of the best games of all time, and is still going strong to this very day. Now, I haven't played these, and I didn't want to write too much about them, because if I don't have an experience with them, I really don't know what to say without it being inauthentic. But I think they are equally as important to mention.
That's code word for I don't want people yelling at me at the comments.
And besides, the more we talk and get into stuff like RuneScape, the more I feel like we get farther from the point of this video. These are nostalgic MMOs or experiences that we just don't see anymore nowadays. And why?
Don't rush me, I'm trying to build tension here.
A lot of these are still ongoing in some zombie forms, so I can't say the genre is technically dead, but I think the lack of relevancy for these online games can be attributed to a few factors. I think the biggest one, though, is something you've probably heard before: mobile games and their dominance. These rose to prominence in the early 2010s and had a massive draw for the casual market. Looking back to the mid-2000s, phone games weren't really an option yet, at least not in a particularly appealing way, and the idea for a parent of being able to hand your kid your laptop and run around on ClubPenguin was an incredible distraction at the time it existed. You could buy a game console like a DS and have to buy games and whatnot, or a home console even, which is a lot more money, or you could have your kids play something for close to free. Mobile games were a problem for these companies because when it comes to products oriented towards a younger audience, their relevance is contingent on future generations replacing the older ones. Unless you found the fountain of youth, we're all gonna get older. I played Roblox, ClubPenguin, Neopets, and Webkinz pretty religiously as a child, but once I got to be even 12 or 13, I kinda just didn't care anymore. There were more sophisticated games that I wanted to play, like Pokemon or Zelda even. My time time at these games was done, and if I really wanted to socialize, it certainly wasn't going to be on a site with people way younger and more immature than me. So that's the very problem. These services basically require new generations to pick up the slack when people like us probably left it. But when you have a product that's easier and cheaper, it automatically wins out the attention and convenience for parents and children alike anyways. They saw the writing on the wall. So I think we started seeing some of these sites trying to adapt to the times. Roblox did this very well, as said, but it did so at the cost of maintaining a debatably dangerous environment and kind of scraping away its entire identity. Not every site did it as well as Roblox. ClubPenguin specifically practically died out because it wasn't making enough money. I think it's very telling that Club Penguin Island was incredibly phone-oriented. It's sad, but in a weird sort of way, it is not the death of the genre at the same time. Webkinz still exists, Pop Tropico still exists, and there are more examples, of course, but how often you hear people talk about any of these nowadays? How many kids do you know that are actively making Webkinz accounts? I'm not saying they don't exist, and now that our generation who grew up with these games is getting older, I'm sure there are some parents who make their kids play these things, but I think we can agree that these sites are at a very minimum not commonplace in any sort of way nowadays. But to be honest, I think these games dying out could be for the best. I played most of these games as a kid, and while they were great memories, I really don't think they're safe experiences. Even the lack of moderation aside, these were monetized to hell and back, and while that's legally fine for games made for adults, I think it's a little scummy when you have games tailored to young audiences who just aren't able to make smart purchasing decisions. I'm gonna retcon something I said earlier, but you know, I didn't want to spoil the whole point of the video, but Neopets did it best, I think, by not updating anything in a way. It kinda just accepts what it is and just remains a free, wholesome experience. It's almost a museum, and the legacy of it really hasn't been ruined that badly. Many people our age think of it kindly, in fact. Whereas Club Penguin, while still having nostalgic memories, will go down in history as something that died of corporate greed. Don't get me wrong, I'll miss these games still. Whether you had a great experience with them or didn't. I think that's in part just an amalgamation of the experience of the human existence. There's plenty of good and bad in the world, internet or not. I've said this in previous videos, but not everything we play or are nostalgic for has to be around forever. Especially in the age of reboots or endless spin-offs where nothing is off the table. It's okay for things in your life to be a distant memory. Things happen for a reason, and these sites will always serve the place they did for us as children. And if you ever want to log in and visit your Neopets or your Webkinz, you'll always be able to do so too.
Son of a